Welcome back to the third episode of Phoenix. I'm super excited just to be here today. We are a little bit late, but if anyone knows me, they know that that's completely consistent with with my style in life. But we had some technical difficulties, so in doing hundreds of podcasts in my career right now, I think this is the first time I actually had to redo it. So I want to thank our guest today
I'm
for
happy
coming
to be
back and re-recording this. I feel like the second time it's going to be even better than the first time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Well, I appreciate you coming here the first time. I appreciate you coming here the second time. So today we have with us Kim DeMao. I met Kim just last week or whatever, and it feels like I've known Kim for my entire life. We've got our lives actually intermingle in weird places.
Yep.
It's just completely odd. But I met Kim because I believe it was your sister.
It was my cousin.
Or your cousin, I'm sorry, contacted me after our first episode and said, you have to hear Kim's story. I heard your story. There's a lot of parallels. I think she would be fantastic for you to meet. So, and talk to. So I think we communicated first on Facebook Messenger, and then eventually we talked, and it was so crazy when you got here. We were like, how do we not know each other all our lives? So
it was like 6 degrees of each other.
So I want to start out by, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself right now, and then we'll get into the story. So don't give away the story yet, but if you want to just introduce yourself really quickly, we'll start there.
My name is Kim DeMao. I started a podcast. I'm an author. I grew up here in the Chicagoland area. I kind of lived a little bit of a sheltered bubble life. Went to like the whole private school route my whole life, but then I went to college in Georgia, came back, and I'm definitely on this reinventing path right now because I'm in my 40s and I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And I think that more people should jump on my bandwagon.
And I feel like I'm almost like I've led a career that way. Like I never really figured out what I wanted to do, so I just did everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like every little kid wants to be a fireman, so I became a fireman for a little bit. You know, I worked in computers because my dad was a computer guy, and I felt like I should follow in his footsteps. I worked for nonprofits because I thought that was a good thing to do in life. So I just kind of feel like I never really found out what I wanted to do. I love what I'm doing right now.
Which is everything.
Which is being an entrepreneur, being a marketing and communications director for a big law firm. So I love doing what I'm doing right now, but it was funny. I kind of like meandered around and found something. So it's kind of like, we're kind of in the same boat on that side too. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about what happened to you that day. So let's start out is, how long ago did this happen?
So literally 3 years ago, right around now.
Okay. All right. So tell me what happened.
Okay. So 4 years ago, right around now is when like the whole world shut down because of COVID. And I had twin boys that were in 7th grade, and we didn't know what was going to come from the whole COVID thing, but the whole world literally shut down on their birthday. And they're my twins are extremely social. They're shy, just like their mom, if you can't tell. And our house was always like the house that everyone went to. So I'm also a high functioning lupus patient. So, and I say patient because I don't think of myself as sick until I really am. So it's just, something that I have to live with. And the doctor called me on a Sunday, and because I was like, should I still take my medication? Because it's an immunosuppressant, I'm like, should I suppress my immunity, or should I build it? Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And she called me on a Sunday and kind of scared me. And she was like, you need to treat yourself as if you've already been exposed. So we actually had to close the doors on like the friends coming over and stuff. And my kids handled it with such grace and stride. So that was that first year. So for the second year, for their next birthday, when they were in 8th grade, I wanted to do something big because they never complained. They were great. They were so cooperative. They were amazing. So I also believe that like everything happens for a reason. And I started a job at a restaurant, and I met someone at at the restaurant who was the GM at Topgolf. And it just so happened that she was wonderful. She set me up with a great package for my kids to go to Topgolf. And their birthday's in March. So we went on a random Tuesday night because it was cheaper than a weekend. And then I thought, this would be great. This will be something for the kids to do during spring break, and it'll be like an event for them to go to. So it was great. So I'm also notoriously late for everything, like
including this podcast. We're late together.
There we go. Yes, exactly.
It's only fitting.
Exactly. So tell me 20 minutes earlier and I'll probably get on time. I'll be there on time. So I thought their birthday party that I put together was on a Tuesday, and I thought it was from 6 to 9. So the kids were only 15, so we had to like wrangle all the teenagers in different cars. And it was my sister-in-law, my sister, and myself, and just getting all the teenagers out there. And when we got to Topgolf, it turned out that the birthday party was actually 6:30 to 9:30. And when my phone is always glued to me, as most of us are, our phones are always attached to us. And it just so happened to be that brief moment when they were bringing like appetizers out. We were singing happy birthday, and I was about to start taking pictures with my phone that all of our phones kind of started blowing up. And it was my sons that came up to me and they're like, "Mom, we need to leave. Our house is on fire." And I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, wait, what?" And I mean, whoever would expect to get that news? And when I reached over to look at my phone, it was my neighbor. And she's like, "You need to get home now. It's bad. The house is on fire." So my husband and my brother-in-law left right away. Someone had to pay the bill. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll do that. And it was weird. It felt like the whole world was in slow motion at that point. And people were like, did you panic? Were you like, what happened? I think someone has to panic. And I hate to throw my husband under the bus, but he was the panicker. And I told you this before, I was like eerily calm and everything was in slow motion. And I think that's my like defense mechanism of like, okay, someone has to help get through this and someone has to be the calm person. So we got in our car and we headed back home and we went to the disaster.
Yeah. I think it's interesting when, you said first of all, I think it's interesting when you said you had this air of calmness, and I don't think, and so we have the exact same, very similar story.
Yep.
And I was 2 o'clock in the morning. It just woke me up, and I was like a nutcase. So I was like,
you had a fire also.
Find the dog, throw the dog out the front door. We'll catch him sometime later.
We'll figure
go
it
back
out.
in. I need my keys. Call this person, call that person, call this person, and I was like so in this mode of trying. But I think that also came from when you came home. It was already everything was going on already.
Right.
I woke
Right.
up to find it. So
Right.
I was calling my
So
mom.
we were,
I
like,
was
in
calling
different-
my mom. I was like literally calling my mom. I'm like, "Mom,
Yep.
my house is on effing fire."
Yep.
And she remembers that call till today. It was on her anniversary. And it was I think 9 years ago this year. And she remembers it and she's like, "You never swear at me." And you just said, "My house is on effing fire. I need help." And so it's foreign to me that you were like calm when that happened.
It was super
So-
bizarre, and I can't explain it any other way other than that. And I felt like I was in slow motion. I almost felt like I was on the outside of the experience and watching the experience happen.
What was that feeling like when you were at Topgolf and all of a sudden your son comes up to you and says, "Mom, we got to go. The house is on fire"?
That's when everything almost like time stopped, and I was like, what do I do next?
Mm-hmm.
And I think usually, like in any normal situation, I get very overwhelmed very easily. I'm very high strung, and I think that this is like my brain's way of saying like, okay, we need to take this a step at a time and we need to figure it out. Like my sister, it was so funny, my sister and I got in her car with 2 of my boys and their best friend, and I was telling you last week, it wasn't until like a couple days later that I was like, how did all the other teenagers get home? Like it was way later that my poor sister-in-law had to take like 15-year-olds home. But my sister was like, she was talking to me, but I can tell that she was trying to calm herself down. She's
Yeah.
like, everything's going to be okay. Don't worry. We're going to get this. And at that point, we had a 1-year-old puppy in a crate and we had a 5-year-old cat. And she kept like repeating over and over again. And she was like, the cat and the dog are going to be okay. Everything is going to be fine. And in my head, I'm like, are you convincing me or are you convincing yourself? I'm like, we'll figure it out when we get there. And the kids were just super quiet in the back and like the look of fear was on their face. And I was more worried about, how to be there for them. Like someone had to be strong and because they were looking at me. So someone had to steer the ship,
Well, it's hard because there's no playbook for this kind of situation.
Yeah, what happens when your house burns down for dummies? Nope, they didn't make that. But we're going to make that.
I think we honestly, I was like, we should make a website like, Home Fire Survivor, where to turn to for help, or like a Facebook group on like, partnering with people, or just offering advice to people, because I had no idea what happened, and now a board up company is coming up to my house and saying they're supposed to board up the house, and I'm on my way to the hospital, and a brother is at the house, and they tell me I can't go back into the house ever again, and I don't know what to do with the mortgage company. I don't know what to do, with the insurance company. There's no
playbook.
Yeah. So. All right, so your son tells you rush home. When you get home and you pull up, I remember when I was leaving the scene in an ambulance, I remember looking up, because I was on a stretcher, so naturally looking up. But I remember seeing the sky was filled with smoke. Like the whole block was filled with smoke. And I remember seeing like red and blue. Now I live in Chicago, so I saw like the red lights and the red and white lights of the fire apparatus that were there, but I would see the reflections in the smoke, and same way in blue lights and the police cars that were out there, and that's the images. And I remember like the smell.
Oh, the smell is a trigger to
all
me
the
still.
Smell, absolutely, and it's kind of crazy because. We may have snuck into the house. And
I totally did.
And tried to get some stuff out. And I mean, it was very unproductive because everything that was not ruined by fire was ruined by smoke, or was ruined by.
Yeah.
And they tell you, wash your clothes with Gain and the smoke smell will come out. First of all, it doesn't. And all that did for me.
Now it smells like smoke and Gain.
And all that did for me is set up another trigger. Like, I cannot buy Gain laundry detergent.
Right.
Like, we can't have Gain scented garbage bags. Like, my wife knows these are anything that says Gain, stay away from. I don't care how much cheaper or more expensive it is or something else. You cannot buy Gain because of that trigger. But so I guess when you got to your house, what were you thinking? You're walking up. You couldn't park close, right? You had
right. So it was unusually warm for March in Chicago, and it was the end of Chicago, and it was March 30th. So like I'm gonna bounce. Excuse me, sorry. I'm gonna bounce back and forth because I totally have ADD here. So a lot of people found out on like March 31st or April 1st, and people were like, "Is this an April Fool's joke?" And I'm like, "This is a sick joke. If it was a sick April Fool's joke." So we actually had to park 3 blocks away. And one wonderful thing about my subdivision and my neighborhood is, by the time we got there, we had to park 3 blocks away. Everybody was out front. There were so many people. It was like a weird victory walk in a 6th sense of the way. We were walking up to our house and people were I remember, but I don't remember, like people were coming up and like hugging us, and I was still walking. And then my husband met me and we walked up to the fire chief, and the fire chief was like, "I'm really sorry, your dog and your cat did not make it." And I was like, "Oh,
is that the first thing they said to you?"
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, that was. And then they kind of divided and conquered because it's still a business and they still have to do their punch list.
Yeah.
And my husband had to identify the dog and the cat that were actually in the ambulance, and like they
really
they were in the ambulance.
Wow.
And like they had oxygen on them. And my husband said that it looked like
what happens when you live in the suburbs.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, not only that,
that would happen in Chicago.
We were unincorporated, so there were 8 trucks that were there.
Yeah.
And mind you, right now it sounds like I have like a McMansion because there were 8 fire trucks there. I have like a little itty bitty house. So
yeah, but I mean, even when my house in Chicago, I probably had 5 or 6 different trucks or so.
It's crazy.
And it was all Chicago. I mean, I know the truck and engine that was closest to my house was actually out on a different call. And so the first responding engine for my fire, I believe, came from Midway Airport, which was, I mean, 4 or 5 miles from where my house was. But because it was, I don't know, because there was another call at the time, I got the I got the next available house.
Right.
But there was so much traffic. I mean, like, and I was DJing at a bar at the time on Saturdays. That night, I took off from the bar to DJ a wedding, and the bar was literally 2 blocks down. And so people were coming out of the bar and like walking down the blocks at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning to make sure
That it wasn't you.
Yeah,
And
to
it
make
was.
sure it was me. And the owner lived a couple doors down. The other owner lived a couple, across the alley, across the street. So they were trying to see if it was one of us, and it was. But it's a weird. It just
Until you go through it, it's really hard to explain.
Yeah.
The thing that I didn't like is that they separated us right away, and they looked at me and they're like, well, do you, this is great. I mean, I love how I understand that they have a protocol that they have to go through, but they're like, do you have your homeowner's insurance information? And I'm like, yeah, in there. Because who carries their homeowner's insurance information on them? I'm like, yeah, it's in there, and it's in a lockbox, and it's, it's in my house, but we can't get in there right now. And so now I'm like extremely app savvy. Like everything is on an app. Everything is on my phone. I can figure out everything. And some of the things that they ask you are, and I forgot to ask you about this earlier. They ask you if you keep receipts for things for like years.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, well, we have a TV. We got it. And so this is in March. I'm like, well, we just finished our basement. They're like, oh, so you have a new TV in the basement? And I'm like, yes, we do. And they're like, do you still have the receipt? And I'm like, no.
Who keeps the receipt?
Do you have the box from it?
Yeah.
I'm like, absolutely not. So like some of the stuff that they ask you, and then they asked us, which I never thought of before, so maybe this is helping someone out there. They asked us if every 6 months, if we walk around our house with a video recording device of some sort and take inventory of everything we've had. I have never thought about that ever in my life until this happened.
Yeah.
So I was like I was across the street at my neighbor's front lawn trying to contact insurance and, first of all, proving that you have homeowners insurance. Otherwise, like they wouldn't proceed. And then giving them the insurance information, talking to the board up company, and everything was happening really fast, but yet really slow. Like it's like when you're watching TV and someone's standing there and they have everything going in fast motion and you're just kind of like zoning out. Like that's kind of how it was.
Yeah. I know. I never had a deal. It took me 5 days to get an answer from my insurance company, and it's a whole different nightmare of a situation than you encountered. But I called my insurance company, told me to call my mortgage company. I was like, I'm confused.
Right.
Or maybe you're confused, but there is a fire and I need insurance right now. you
Right.
know, and my situation was that the mortgage company, while the insurance was escrowed, never paid out the premium, and so I never had to deal with the insurance company, which was horrific because that
you
means
never got any
nothing.
relief.
Yeah, so I just had to rebuild from scratch. So, what was it like being mom at that moment? Because I would imagine, like, as a mother, all moms want to be like there for their husband or there for their kids. And then the last person on that list, then there for the dog or the cat or the neighbors, make sure the kids got home from Top Golf. And then you're at the bottom of that list, processing, I guess.
Sometimes you're not even on that list.
Yeah. What was that experience like when you had to do that?
Well, I love how you and I both shared that that the one person that you and I both went to after we had our incidents was our moms.
Yeah.
And like later on that night, after things calmed down and I was still in my neighbor's front yard, but they like kept everyone away from me. That's when I called my mom, and that's my moment that I lost it. And I think we all need our moms, at some point.
Yeah.
But and everything that I'm about to say, I told you I was going to be raw and I was going to be honest. My husband did not handle this well at all. it messed with him. I don't know if it was the animals, the fire, the everything. But he kind of curled up in a ball and kind of went in a bad place for quite a while.
Yeah.
And we were fortunate enough that we are living with his mom at her house, which is spacious enough and it's a home, and it's kind of bittersweet comforting, because the dog that we lost in the fire, my mother-in-law has, it's her sister. So like that's kind of comforting. So that's great. But someone has to steer the ship. And I was kind of just in survival mode, and I wanted to make things as normal and as happy and as, I don't know, I was trying to do the best that I could with what I had. Like, we lived probably like 10 to 15 minutes away from everyone in our tight-knit community. I never said no if my kids wanted to go by their friend's house. Like, I was in my car all day long, driving back and forth. And like, they never missed like sports activities or anything like that. Like,
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you're the third guest on this podcast, and every guest actually comes from a moment of struggle, and we talk about in detail that moment. And all three guests, the comforting call went to mom.
and you too.
Yeah, so me, you, and then John Ehrman told me when he was diagnosed with cancer, the first thing he did was call his mom. And so I think it's interesting. If you, what would you say to your mom today about her
About
being there for
everything?
and her being there for you, and what it meant for you to call and kind of break down to her at that moment?
So when I called my mom, just hearing her voice and her telling me, I am so sorry, but don't worry, everything is going to be all right. I believed her.
Yeah.
And look, everything
Same.
is okay. And we're going to take it a step at a time. And she kept almost like she kept setting the pace for me, like everything is going to be okay. We're going to do this. And if there was even the slightest, smallest victory, like we celebrated it, like, oh, yay, like the windows came in or this happened,
Yeah.
or she highlighted the positive and never really brought up the negative. And I needed that, it's like a defense mechanism. And if I'm half the woman that she is, then I think my kids are going to be kind of lucky.
Yeah.
So
I mean, my mother is the rock in our family, and I think like with the passing of my dad a couple of years ago, like we just became even stronger of a family. And every time I think our family faces a challenge or something like that, I think a family could either come together and, mount up, I guess.
Right.
I don't always say that, but like they come together and really be the strongest they've ever been, or it can shatter a family.
Absolutely.
And we had that happen, with a relative of ours, as someone passed away and the family just broke apart over stupidity, and our family always looked at that and just said kind of, that's crazy. I'm like, we'll always be for each other.
Yep.
And even like, I hate saying this because when my dad passed, I said to my dad in the hospital, I said, listen, Dad, I'll always be there for Mom. And I whispered that into his ear the day, 10 minutes before he passed away. And so like, I think that being together, those moms are just so important. I don't know how they have the grace or whatever to be that calm force that just kind of offers kind of, direction and stability in those moments. So it's interesting that mine was the same way. Okay, get off of the fire.
Let's go. Yeah.
What happens next?
So I mean, it's still kind of like a work in progress, but it's the rebuilding process.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I want to say for my kids and for myself, it's like before the fire and after the fire. Like that is a huge,
It's like the BCAD thing.
yes, 100%, 100%. And I mean, when you wake up the next day, I remember. So I had to be escorted to my car that night because there were people that listen, like ambulance chasers, for lack of better words, but there were like contractors all up and down the street. And I mean, things you don't know if you don't know.
Yeah.
That if there was a fireman that was escorting me to my car, a contractor could not come up to me and talk to me. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So then it was the fireman that looked at me and he was like, you might want to stop at like Walmart or Target or something. and you might want to like pick up like toothpaste and toothbrushes and underwear. And I kind of looked at him and I'm like, oh yeah, we don't have anything. We literally, just as you did, we had the clothes on our back, and
Yeah.
that was it. And then because of the way that it was explained to us is because of the chemicals from, it was an electrical fire, and because of the chemicals that are in, it's not just water that puts out a fire, there's chemicals in the water, and when mixed with the electrical fire, it actually like disintegrates the remainder of whatever's left in your house. And it was kind of weird because in Erie, because I did go back to the house, and especially in the basement where it started, like you saw like stuff start decomposing. It was crazy. So we couldn't get anything. So we thought that insurance was amazing, and they came the next day and they cut us a check for $5,000, and I'm like, wow, this is great. And that
It's going to be the easiest money when it would come.
That
The
was
rest.
that was the only easy part. And things that they don't tell you, like they fight you for everything, and rebuilding is a hassle. And all of this happened in the thick of COVID. So like now, like all of the price for supplies is like huge. There's, stuff stuck on boats in the middle of China. Like you can't get supplies or materials, and people don't want to touch your project because it's an insurance-based project. And
So you're rebuilding the same house.
right.
What does that feel like? I can't even go back to my old house.
So my husband was like that for a long time. And it's so strange that you say that, Jason, because I do not have an attachment to it. Like it's just a thing to me. Whereas before it was home, it's not home yet.
Yeah.
And we moved a little bit around to kind of make it more like homey or whatever. I'm starting to, as of recently, I'm starting to walk in and I'm starting to see like what my future is going to be in this house.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, I wouldn't trade anything for these past 3 years for everything that this fire, this tragedy has taught me. Cause I think that tragedy has totally turned to triumph for sure.
So let's go on that for a second. You're rebuilding your house, but you're also rebuilding
Myself.
yourself. Tell
Yep.
me a little bit about what you're doing now, because I think what you're doing right now is pretty cool.
Thank you. While at the beginning of the fire, I published my first book, and I had a lot of time in solitude. I started writing again, and I started just thinking, which is dangerous, right? It could be. And journaling and kind of figuring stuff out, like, what I want to be when I grow up. I started a podcast, and the podcast is it's similar to what you stand for. Like I want to, empower not necessarily just women, but it is a lot of women, but I want to empower people to try something new, to stand on their own platform. I want to applaud victories, small and large. Like I definitely want to do that. I want to kind of work with charities and give things back to people. Like this fire was so much more than just me. And I want to be a part of making anyone's tragedy into a triumph.
Yeah. I, when mine happened, the Red Cross came out. And I don't know if I'm assuming they came out.
I never got the Red Cross.
Really?
Just
well, they
saying.
came out, and I can make a call on that one. But I made a call, they came out to my house, and I didn't really take them up. They came and offered, assistance, like, are you on medication? Do you need, help getting new medication? Do you need help with going somewhere? And I came from a really close family. We talked about that, and so I didn't really need that. I didn't have anything, but I also had a good family that was going to help me through this. And I had an incredible base of friends. And I talk about family a lot, but one of my closest friends literally drove halfway across Chicago at 2:00 in the morning because he worked at OEMC, which is Office of Emergency Management and Communication. They're the ones who answer 911.
Oh, okay.
He worked there, and so he came running over. He was like, "I'll help you." He was a suburban fireman at the time too, so he was like, "Don't worry, go to the hospital and get better, and we'll figure out the kind of what's going on with the house." I think, and then we had like family friends who came over and brought me I know it's so embarrassing, but like brought me like money to try to
See,
get
this
back.
is the difference between like men and women. We talked about this last week. So I think men have like, and I'm not saying this in a negative way at all, but men, they have like a pride that they're the providers and
Yeah.
they're the ones
Yeah.
that want to be the givers, not the receivers. My hands were up in the air. I was like, I'll take it all. Like,
I had a really hard time with it, especially because I worked in the charity world for a long time, and I was like, I'm the one getting money or giving money to
Right.
make lives better. I'm not the one who's receiving it. And someone once said something to me, and um, actually, she's a politician who's a very, very dear friend of mine, and she said to me, she's like, Jason, if you don't let people help you, you are depriving them of the opportunity to be helpful.
correct.
And I never thought about it that way. And I'm like, well, I'm still embarrassed that someone has to help me.
Right,
But,
right.
you know, it's a really interesting way to look at it where, like, you know, you're giving that opportunity to someone to be a good person.
Correct.
And so I was very fortunate to have so many really good friends and family members who kind of helped out at that point. So it was difficult. So tell us about what's the name of your podcast?
So my podcast is called Commanding Conversations.
There you go.
And it's Kim, like Kim Manding, like my name.
Yep. And then tell us a little bit about your publishing.
So I started a publishing company because I figured everyone has a story within them and I want to help leave that legacy behind. So you can find us at emberentertainment.com, and we have tons of packages that we can work with you with. I have illustrators and editors, and we're doing awesome. And
What do you publish?
So I publish children's books, but we ghostwrite as well for adult fiction, and we have a few nonfictions in the work right now. So, pretty much you have a story, we can make it happen.
Well, I think it's interesting that you have Ember Entertainment. I have Phoenix.
Yep.
There's all these like fire related.
You know why? Because we're all rising from the ashes, you know?
Absolutely. So, what's next for you?
So next is moving on. I'm wanting to definitely build that platform on my podcast. I have so many people I reached out just for people with inspirational stories, and I am overwhelmed with the response that I've gotten, and I love it, and I'm so grateful. And I'm ready to get people's legacy and people's stories out there, and I kind of want to help be a little part of leaving a little positivity behind.
Yeah. If you can go back and kind of look at your whole experience, is there one word that kind of wraps up the experience, or you can describe your experience?
Perspective.
Yeah.
I love the
Explain
word
that.
perspective. So one thing that would bother me at first is people would say, "Oh my gosh, that's such a tragedy. That's so awful. This is so horrible. This is the worst thing that could ever happen to someone." And it really got under my skin. And I was like, wait a second. I'm lucky. I'm so lucky. And you're probably like thinking, this girl's crazy. How could she be lucky? And what are the chances that I would be out of my house on a random Tuesday when
And your family.
and my family, everybody was out of the
You were
house.
all safe.
And we were all safe. And I'm late for everything. And it was a random Tuesday during spring break. And unfortunately, our bulldog and our cat didn't make it. I get it. But what happens if it was in the TV sparked, and when the TV sparked, it vascularly ignited a fire within our house, and the fire chief said within 90 seconds, everything was up in smoke. What if that happened? Because what I forgot to tell you is that my wonderful teenage children took the batteries out of our smoke detector and our carbon monoxide detector for their Xbox remotes. So
I cannot believe you're telling me this story, because literally I'm kind of like
You're
that
bad.
teenage boy.
You're bad.
You know, I got the same mentality there. I took the remote. I took the batteries out of my remote.
You're bad.
And actually it's funny because I decided that I didn't want other people to be in that same boat. Clearly, you did not watch the story on ABC News about me, but they came and did a whole story on my fire. We went back to the house. It was really actually emotional. We actually were able to get into part of the house, and it was all in conjunction with the American Red Cross on making sure that you have working smoke detectors. And I kind of became the spokesperson for the Red Cross for a long time on home fire prevention and smoke detectors and why you should never take the batteries out of your remote control. And my mom said to me, she's like, why would you go on TV and tell everyone how stupid you are or were?
Because you know what? How many other people are probably
Exactly.
like, you know what? Maybe this is a sign, and maybe I should go replace those batteries right now.
And you know what? You live in a nice, great neighborhood. I lived in a great neighborhood in Chicago. The last thing I thought would happen would be
It doesn't happen to people
a
like us.
fire. And when I was talking to when Everard Castme from Channel 5 interviewed me on my first episode, he said to me something about, we were talking about the neighborhood and how I left my DJ equipment in the car overnight. And he was like, I don't know if I want to leave my city sticker in the car overnight,
Right.
let alone anything of value. But where I grew up, and I had that house at the time, it was super safe. Every other house was either a police or a fireman or a school teacher or a park district. It was all city workers.
Right.
I knew everybody on my block. Every person on the block knew me and I knew them. And I had their number and they had my number. And fires, crazy crimes, they didn't happen. Like
Right.
we had a murder in our neighborhood and it was like everyone knew about that one murder once. And like, it was so crazy. So and he made fun of me for saying, fun things didn't happen in our neighborhood like that, and
See?
and so, but it's the last thing you think about.
Right.
So
Because it happens to other people.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen to us.
wow, I didn't know that about the remote either. So
Boys, I tell you.
so I will tell you the moral of the story is make sure you have a battery in your smoke detector,
Yes.
or just
double check anyway if you have teenagers.
Now they have the smoke detectors. They're the 10-year ones, and the funny thing is, as I became a more vocal advocate for checking your smoke detectors, First Alert sent me a box of smoke detectors with
Nice.
with a battery. Yeah, but where do I put them? It's like I didn't have a home.
Everywhere.
Well, I didn't have a home.
You're like, you know what? Stocking stuffers.
I
There
was
you
like
go.
in my mom's house. And I'm like, is there
Everybody.
a real estate agent or a property developer who could send me a house? I would appreciate it.
Yeah, you could be
but-
like Oprah. You get a smoke detector. You get a smoke
And
detector.
that's basically, now it's like, my friends buy me batteries. My friends buy me, I can't even tell you how many fire extinguishers I have at my house. I mean, they all buy me that. So it's kind of interesting. So, all right. Thank you. Back to, you were talking about perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I can look back, I think my word is persistence.
I love
Persistence. Because the difference in my story, well, I guess maybe not, is when the insurance thing happened. And I just felt like the fire was a big punch and knockout, whatever. And then the insurance company or the mortgage company not paying the insurance company was another punch, another knockout, And to me, it was just like I was starting a new business and I had payroll and I had to figure out how to get money for payroll. That was a knockout.
Yeah.
It was a big punch.
In the same boat.
I just put down a down payment on the engagement ring for my wife at the time. So, or my girlfriend at the time. And that was a punch. I just felt like I was getting punched and knocked down at every instance. And to me, it was all about the persistence of getting back up and that mentality where you say to yourself, and I remember saying this like physically, I remember crying and saying to myself, this is not going to get the best of me.
That's right.
I'm going to beat this. And I have the friends, I have the family, and I have the attitude where I'm not going to let this take me down.
Absolutely.
And so I think my word would have been persistence, but definitely perspective makes a lot of sense as well too. But yeah, so thank you for being here. Thank you for
Thank you for
telling your
having
story.
me.
I know that it's not the easiest thing to tell your story over and over and over again. But thank you for sharing and thank you for
you.
offering perspective on it. So, wow, we
word.
tie it all together.
Look at that.
So I invite you to check out Commanding Conversations. They can probably check
All
it
platforms.
out. Okay, all platforms. And then after you come back to Phoenix and listen again, anywhere else that people should check you out?
So we also, if you are interested, if you have a story out there that you think that, well, you know that it should be shared, I want to support you, and you can find us at emberentertainment.com.
All right. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll be back in 2 weeks. A little bit less because I was a little late this time, but that's okay. All right. Thanks again for joining in.
Thank you.